bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? When you were 8 and you had bad traits, you go to school and learn the golden rule. So why are you acting like a bloody fool? If you get hot, then you must get cool, bad boys.
So I couldn't resist. I had to play the theme song from the TV show Cops. When you actually look at the lyrics written by Inner Circle, it's interesting to see what they're writing about. They're essentially trying to figure out where does badness come from, and sometimes you wonder if they're talking about the criminals versus the cops. So it's kind of interesting if you go look up the lyrics, you can see what I'm talking about. So by way of introduction, we're going to continue here in Module 4, looking at Crime Fighters Part 2, and we'll look at police as infotainment, media cops versus real cops, and media constructs of citizen soldiers. So first, Cops is our reality programming that many of us have seen. It's been on for many, many years, and it portrays police in kind of two lights. First, as sensitive, knowledgeable, competent, never careless, or it can also show them as corrupt, foul-mouthed, or overwhelmed. It's kind of funny to see them juxtaposed to each other. There is also a very heavy racial component, which usually plays out like this. You have a white cop, you have a minority criminal, and you have a white victim. Although not all reality programming or cop dramas show this, this is the most common casting as far as race goes, and often what people think about when they think about who the cops are, who the criminals are, and who the victims are racially. So again, perpetuating the stereotype. Most crime is actually within race rather than between the races, and research has documented that. We also see more violent solved crimes on infotainment, and it makes us think that all crime is violent and that all crime gets solved that's violent, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's driven by demand in reality television, not reality, and it's presented as if it is reality, painting that public perception. It's framed under the faulty system frame of things not working and that being part of the drama. And due process is really disparaged, and crime control is applauded. So due process is painted as a hindrance in these types of shows, and it's not as interesting to follow due process as it is to follow action. So there's a table in the Surrett text where it talks about media cops and real cops. And so we're actually going to blow up this table in your slides so you can see it in a little more detail. This is table 5.1 from your book, and it has kind of a theme from these shows as it's portrayed and then what happens in reality. So let's go through this. The first theme is action. In media cops, there is never a dull moment, always doing or planning or about to act. When in real cops, there's kind of a tedium and adrenaline are both experienced, where you get hours upon hours of boredom interrupted by moments of sheer panic. Paperwork is the norm. Action is actually rare and unexpected and certainly not predictable. So that's more of the reality there. As far as the theme of crime, in media, cops are portrayed as fighting serious crime, being the foremost of their duties. It's the most exciting. Felony arrests are common, and each crime is unique and exceptional. Cops are attuned to these nuances and are attentive. In reality, felony arrests are actually rare. Most cops deal with misdemeanors, petty offenses, or grievances by neighbors. Officers diffuse social situations and prevent crime and escalation, but don't do a lot of active crime fighting. Stories about law-breaking are repetitive and dull the impact and believability of the suspects, because you kind of see the same thing play out day after day, and you get a little bored. Other themes. Violence. Cops are violent, they menace, they fight, they shoot, they kill with relative impunity. Physical force, even brutality, is part of solving crimes, when nothing, again, could be further from the truth. In real cops, officers often work in a mean and cruel world, but usually one of potential rather than actual violence. Most crimes are nonviolent, and officers will tell you they do not enjoy having to get out their guns. Some rarely do, some never have. It's a moment that is incredibly disheartening and stressful for them. Heroes and villains. In Media Cops, clearly define good and evil with any ambiguity resolved by a program's end. When in reality, the good and the bad are mostly gray. Good people do bad things, bad people sometimes perform good acts. Most people have elements of both, and cops also witness real social problems that aren't necessarily crimes like poverty and people not having supports or access to things that they need, which pushes them to go get it illegally. Other themes: status. Patrolmen and unis, or uniformed police officers, are often the dumb background foils. Plainclothes detectives are the brilliant problem solvers. Real cops are that officers are really the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system, who make early crucial decisions, like looking for reasonable suspicion, apprehension, arrest, and evidence collection. On the theme of insight, in Media Cops, they have some kind of psychic awareness of what people are thinking and what the clues and the evidence are, and they uncover the truth. They have these omniscient qualities that allow them to defy procedures and still triumph. In reality, officers are given almost no advance warning or information for dangerous encounters or investigations, and are under great pressure to obey procedures and administrative policy. For the theme of closure, Media Cops have almost no unsolved cases at the end of a story, and all the loopholes are closed. In reality, events have a middle. They often arrive after something happened, but really no beginning and no end. And cops usually arrive after trouble has started, rarely see the resolution of their cases that they confront. On the theme of justice, in media, cops rarely deal with law, which is often seen as an obstacle to justice and as a source of technicalities used by shyster lawyers to get people off. The hero cop directly dispenses justice and avenges wrongs. In reality, cops must obey the law. Because of the complexity of the law and its emphasis on due process rights, it's a glacial pace that leaves cops often enforcing the rules that they don't actually think work and being very careful to make sure that they make a legal arrest. On the themes of backstage and budget and resources. So in media, they have a sanitized backstage. You never really see it, and when you do, it's very organized. No matter how crude, the hero cop rarely alienates the audience, and you don't see them making mistakes. In reality, sex, lies, and stupidity are common themes at crime scenes, and cops often make fun of or complain about or criticize many of the victims and suspects they encounter because they make their job a lot more challenging and unpredictable. As far as budget and resources are concerned, in media, they have uncapped, limitless budgets with endless forensics, equipment, labs, specialists, personnel, and reinforcements available at their disposal. But in reality, cops have hard limits on the amount of evidence gathering and testing can be done, investigation time limitations, and scarce departmental resources that can be devoted to a case. As far as chronology, in media you see what we call time compression, where months are covered in minutes. Events are edited to swift progress of the story, moving it along into rapid resolution. So the example given is crime TV shows must solve the crime in 40 minutes with commercial interruption. We know that's not reality. In reality, a glacial war with long periods between steps happen with real cops. And cops understand how long it can take the system to address an issue with various decision points along the way. With factual knowledge, in media, cops have godlike powers of observation, and as well as the audience, who sees clues, overhears conversations, sees revealing facial close-ups, and hears voiceovers with insider information kept from the cops. The audience ends up knowing more than the police. In reality, cops are uninformed police, first at the scene. They see what no one in the public sees, except for perpetrators and victims, misery and bloodshed, and the aftermath of violence at close quarters. So this summary just provides us some of that reality with the differences between media police and real world police, how they spend their time, the amount of action they actually get, crime fighting versus diffusing or de-escalation in social situations, who they are, how they act, violence, heroes and villains, status, justice, the resources and skills at their disposal, the insight or public awareness going on, and then certainly how they do their jobs with closure and chronology. So we're going to move into citizen soldiers, as mentioned in your text. These are broken down into two groups. First, private investigators and private citizens. So private investigators really are not bound by the rules. They can be a very diverse group of people, and they emphasize that these people are better than the entire criminal justice system, hence their need for being hired. And we have plenty of examples from your text. Your text mentions lots of shows from over time. So you had Murder, She Wrote with Angela Lansbury, the Bobbsey Twins and the Hardy Boys, kids from storybooks and tales like Tom Sawyer, the Scooby-Doo crime-fighting gang, and many, many others. Those are kind of some of the more historic ones that you might remember. We also discuss in the text the use of ultraviolence, and again, this becomes part of the enhanced media landscape and the tools we have today. So this entails slow motion injuries and fight scenes, detonating blood capsules, increased use of gore, multiple camera angles, and this has become common entertainment and media. So this is where a lot of the question becomes of, does this have a brutalizing effect? You've already seen the research on this in previous modules, so we're not going to get into that, but this is some of where this ultraviolence question came, and also the use of the word super predators in the 90s in criminology, which we know now has largely really been discredited, as well as brought a lot of misconceptions to the field. The distinction between crime fighter and criminal has all but disappeared with regard to who initiates the violence and how much force is actually used. In summary, crime control trumps due process in the media crime fighter world. It's more action-oriented and more interesting. Due process protections and departmental policies are portrayed as hindrances to effectively dealing with crime. Crime in the media are solved by aggressive investigation backed by science and technology that we find fascinating. And crime is really not presented as a social problem tied to other social problems in society. So hopefully you find this helpful in, again, further investigating the portrayal of crime fighters in the media. Thanks, and see you next time.